This is the BetaFPV Meteor65, and it is redefining the kind of performance we can expect from a little 1S tiny whoop like this. In fact, I took this to a whoop race here in Knoxville, and I was pretty annoyed when I showed up and I saw that some guys were running 2S TinyHawk-S's. How is it even fair to run 2S against little 1S guys like this? But here's the thing. I won the race. I beat those guys. And I think that the unique weight and performance of the Meteor65 contributed to that win. It sure as hell wasn't my piloting. The other thing that might have contributed to the win is this new battery connector, the BT2.0 connector, which BetaFPV says is better than the PH 2.0 connector that most of us are using. Less battery sag, longer flight times, more power, higher speed. Sounds great to me. I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today.
Raindrops on the windshield, there's a storm moving in. It's heading back from somewhere that into
I think that's one of the biggest advantages of whoop racing, is you can drink while you're doing it.
Yes. Yes.
Dear FAA, we are indoors. I want to start this video with some footage of me practicing for the whoop race in a little course I set up in my house. And the reason for that is that I think when most people think of whoop racing, they think of an indoor environment, relatively tight, relatively enclosed. And I got to tell you, the Meteor65 was too fast and too powerful for that. It reminded me of my first experience flying something like the Mobula 7, a 2S tiny whoop, where I had to use the throttle curve to get the throttle manageable and avoid just bouncing off the freaking walls. I had to do the same thing for this Meteor on 1S. Indoors in my house, I had to run about a 65% throttle curve just to feel like a throttle limit, just to feel like I could control it. But when I got to the race, it was a little more open environment, and I actually forgot to turn on the throttle curve. I flew the whole race at 100% throttle, and I thought it was perfectly manageable. But if what you're expecting from this Meteor65 is the kind of lower power, controllable, tooling around in between the legs of your table or something, that's not what this is. This is much more akin to a 2S tiny whoop, like a Mobula 7, like a TinyHawk-S, or like an Eachine Trashcan. But it still has the small size and weight. In fact, let's compare the weight. The Meteor comes in at 31 grams, and that's with the 300 milliamp hour battery that it's intended to be used with. This Newbeedrone Acroby comes in at 26 grams, a little bit lighter. And this Eachine Trashcan, with the two batteries you would normally run it with, comes in at 47 grams. So you're kind of getting the performance of a quad like this, kind of, but in the form factor and weight of a quad like this. And this is not a situation where you get the worst of both worlds. It's actually a really, really nice combination. Because in the right environment, this quad really, really shines. And I think I really lucked out that the race that I took it to turned out to be just about the perfect environment for it. If this was a tight indoor track, I would have had to really scale this back, and the lighter weight of an actual like tiny whoop might have been an advantage. But for this kind of course, it's just the right combination of fast straights and tight turns. And in fact, the two guys who are in second and third place in this race behind me, because I won the race. It doesn't happen that often, so I kind of want to make a big deal out of it. The two guys who were in second and third place were both running TinyHawks, and one of them commented that he thought the additional weight of the TinyHawk was causing him to lose in the turns what he was making up in the straights, and he just couldn't keep up with me in the turns. The Meteor comes with a 300 milliamp hour battery, and it's rated for about 2.5 minutes of cruising or 2 minutes of hard flying. And I can attest to the fact that that 2 minutes is freaking honest, because we were doing a most laps in 2 minutes qualifier, And I desperately wanted to be one of the few pilots who got 4 qualifying laps. And one time I would have made it, but my battery was just at 2.8 volts, and I literally could not finish the last 25% of the fourth lap. I was just on the ground, and every time I armed, it just went bloop and stopped. So if you're racing a 2-minute qualifying, this battery is going to, you'll get 2 minutes, but you won't get 2.5, at least not if you're pushing it. I would love to see BetaFPV put out a little bit bigger battery, maybe like a 350 milliamp hour pack. I suspect that 400 milliamp hours might be a little too big, but maybe even that. For scenarios where you want to trade a little bit of flight time for a little bit of weight. I did try swapping out. You can see that these are not the stock props. These are gem fan props. I tried 4-blade gem fan props, and I'd switched to 3-blade gem fan props to try to get just a little bit more flight time. And the bottom line is, if I was racing hard, nothing I did could get me past about 2 minutes and 15 seconds. That was just it. Fortunately, the race itself was first to 2 laps, and I was doing the laps in about 35 seconds. I was easily able to go as hard as I wanted for the whole time and not even really see a low battery warning. Speaking of the props, I don't have any more of the props that BetaFPV sent because they are pretty loose on the shaft and they all popped off. I had that happen several times during practice, and I said, screw this, I'm not racing on these because I can't afford, I take my racing very seriously, folks, and I can't afford to be out of a race because a prop popped off. These gem fan props fit a little bit tighter, and I've seen other reviewers also mention this, so I know it wasn't just me. I like these gem fan props a lot. I didn't have any problem with them coming off. They are a 1mm shaft, not a 0.8mm shaft like some other motors you might have seen. The motors are 0802 in size and 22,000 kV. BetaFPV has said that they're going to release a 19,500 kV version December 10th, which is actually the day that I'm recording this, so that should be out now. BetaFPV advertises a 2-minute flight time for the 22,000 kV version, and I can confirm that that's pretty honest, and a 4-minute flight time for the 19,500 kV version. And I got to tell you, during qualifying, I would have loved the 19.5 kV version. I feel like I definitely could have gotten 4 laps out of qualifying. But for the racing, how much power would I have given up? I'm not sure. You should buy 2. Buy the 22,000 kV for racing and the 19.5 for qualifying. No, I don't know about that, but yeah. The 19.5 might be better depending on what you're doing. At the bottom of the motor is a little PCB, and the wires, it's a little hard to tell because there's heat shrink here, but the wires are actually soldered on. And BetaFPV's thinking is that if you were to rip the wires off somehow or damage the wires, you could solder new wires on and save the motor. The motor also has a bearing. It is not a bushinged motor, which a bearing is going to give you a little bit more performance and a little bit more efficiency and a little bit more lifespan. Although, well, how many of you guys have worn out the bushings on your motors? I don't know. But it's very nice that they're bearing. That's definitely a higher quality thing. Now let's remove this shell and we'll take a look at the inside. I can attest to the durability of the frame and the shell because I crashed a lot while I was racing, and it didn't break. Now, obviously, anything will break if you go hard enough. Nothing is completely unbreakable, but if there was any concern about it being just totally fragile, I feel like I can allay that concern. The camera on the Meteor65 is held in place by this plastic piece. It is not screwed to the shell, as has been done on some previous quads, including BetaFPV quads. The problem with that is that the angle gets knocked, the shell breaks, etc. It's just not a good way of doing it. This plastic piece comes in 35 and 25 degree angle, depending on how fast you like to go. The camera is a new design by BetaFPV, and you can see some flight footage to get a sense of how it looks. I was really impressed with how it looked almost all the time, but when they turned the lights off for the night race, I felt like there was a lot of glare. And to be fair, these cameras, they struggle under these kind of lighting conditions. It really takes a particularly special camera to look great under those lighting conditions. But I remember commending the Caddx EOS camera on the Trashcan for not having that kind of glare back when I reviewed that one. So overall, I'd say this is a really, really good camera for most lighting conditions. But if you're racing in the dark with LEDs, it's not going to be the best at that specific thing. The video transmitter goes up to 25 milliwatts. It'd be nice if it went to more, but it doesn't. And as I've got the shell off, I'm also noticing this is the receiver antenna, and it's really cool of BetaFPV to have thought to do this. Normally, you would see the receiver antenna kind of snaked around up underneath here, and it would get terrible, terrible range. Frankly, the built-in receivers on these flight controllers get terrible, terrible range as it is, but this is making the most of it. In the flights I did, I never got a low RSSI warning, except one time at the very back of the course, I did get an RSSI warning, but overall, I didn't really have a problem with it. It's not going to give you the range of a full receiver like an XM Plus or an RXSR, and you can buy this plug and play and put your own receiver on it if you so desire. Now let's talk about this BT2.0 connector and compare it to the PH2.0 connector that we've been using for pretty much as long as whoops have existed. And it's a really good question as to whether this is just marketing BS or whether it has a concrete advantage, because you probably already own a ton of batteries with PH connectors on them, and yeah, you can get an adapter, but obviously using an adapter that converts it to PH 2.0, you're not getting any of the performance advantages. So what BetaFPV is asking you to do is basically throw out your whoop batteries. Well, I mean, you don't have to, but if you really want the full advantage, you got to reinvest in batteries from BetaFPV. Now, BetaFPV has said that they intend to open up the BT 2.0 connector so other manufacturers can make these batteries. And I hope that they do that, because if you had to buy all your batteries from one company, that nobody would like that. But the real question is there a performance advantage to this connector? And we can look at the construction of these and see that just objectively, there are some benefits to the BT 2.0. You can just see that the pins on the BT 2.0 are thicker than the pins on the PH 2.0. And the BT 2.0 pins are rounded and tapered similar to a bullet connector. So if we look at the battery side, you can see the much larger receptacle on the battery on the BT 2.0 with a much larger surface area. The way that the tapered BT 2.0 pin mates with the battery in the receptacle, you can see it's going to be superior. One of the things that can happen with a PH 2.0 connector is that as it wears out, as the quadcopter side wears out, the battery is not held securely and it can kind of shift, and the pin can kind of just not make good contact. Whereas the kind of tapered, almost like a bullet connector that we're seeing with BT 2.0 is going to do much better at sliding in, making consistent and secure contact. And just having more surface area is going to mean it transfers the energy more efficiently. PH 2.0 is nominally rated for 4.5 amps. BT 2.0 is nominally rated for 9.0 amps, although since BetaFPV invented the connector, they could just be making up that number. This would be the perfect time for me to get out my battery test machine and put these on a test, but I literally just mailed the battery test machine off today to someone who's going to be hopefully using it to do some battery testing for me, and so I can't do that. What's up?
Taco time.
Oh, it's taco time. Oh, for taco time, I'll pause the recording. Thank you for telling me. Taco time! Well, it's taco time, so I got to go get some dinner. So I'll come back and give you the conclusion of this video in a little bit later. But here's the bottom line: PH 2.0 is rated for 4.5 amps, and we're pulling more than that with high performance quads like this. If you're flying a little lower, 16,000 kV 1S, you may not need BT 2.0. You may be fine, but you definitely will notice the sag when using these motors and this high performance quad with a PH 2.0. Oscar Leon, credit to where credit's due, he did a test at 4.5 amps discharge, and he found 0.8 volts more voltage from the BT 2.0 than the PH 2.0. And you're like, oh, 0.08 volts, who cares? Remember, there's like 1 volt of difference between a fully charged and a fully discharged. This is only a 1S, so that 0.8 volts is a big freaking deal. So what are you supposed to do then? Well, you can get a set of adapters from BetaFPV to allow you to charge these batteries on your PH 2.0 chargers. And of course, you don't need to charge super fast, so that won't matter if you're going through a PH 2.0. You can also get spare BT 2.0 connectors and convert your batteries over, but these batteries are a pain in the butt to convert because of the way that this is soldered on. If you intend to convert batteries over to BT 2.0, I would suggest you get, well, these are Eachine, but there's some GNB makes some really, really good 1S 400, 350-ish milliamp hour packs. I'll put the link down in the video description. They have wires like this, and they'll be pretty easy to convert. And frankly, I almost feel like if you're doing like all out first to 2 laps racing, this is a good pack. But if you want any kind of durability, especially on the 22,000 kV motors, get like a 350 or 400 milliamp hour pack, get a GNB with the wires and convert it to BT 2.0, and I think that's going to be the really sweet spot. There's links to all of this stuff I'm talking about, the batteries, the connectors, the adapters, down in the video description. Okay, now I'm going to go eat tacos. Then I'll come back and I'll give you the conclusion. So that brings us to the end of the video, and as always the question, should you buy it? And this is actually a tough question. So, first of all, let me just say, I would take this over something like a Mobula 7 or a Trashcan. I really would. These guys do have some advantages, like higher powered video transmitters. This one only goes up to 25 milliwatts. But overall, I feel like for a certain kind of flying, I take this guy over this guy. The lighter weight, really. It's got this great balance of insane power if you want to open it up, but still pretty lightweight. Whereas this guy, the weight never gets down there, even if you run it on 1S. And if what you want to do is like outdoor acro, well, this would be better, but it's certainly not great. For outdoor acro, you're really looking at like a 3-inch open prop design would be kind of the minimum I'd be looking at for kind of outdoor acro and racing. So I think that the Meteor65 and its ilk do what these guys tried to do even better. Powerful, indoor, speed, light freestyle, and with a throttle limit, reasonable control, although not the same kind of control that you're going to get off of something like this as the Newbeedrone Acro B. But I say the Meteor65 and its ilk, because as good as this guy is, there's a Mobula 6 out there. Happy Model Mobula 6. And it's about 2 grams lighter, so as near as makes no difference. It's got the same spec motors and the same spec ESCs and the same spec VTX, and it doesn't look as nice. And to my eye, the shell doesn't look as durable on the Mobula 6, but the Mobula 6 is like 80 bucks. And the Meteor65 is like 110 bucks. And that's a fair difference. Especially because one of the things you get on the Meteor65 is this BT 2.0 connector. But if you really want that, you could just spend 10 bucks on a pack of connectors and convert any quad you want over to it, and you'll be doing fine. Now, I haven't tested the Mobula 6, so I can't say for sure whether it's better or worse. The Mobula 7 did pretty good, but not the very first release of the Mobula 7. It had some issues with the frame and other issues, had issues with the flight controller dropping out of the sky, and eventually all that got figured out. BetaFPV doesn't exactly have a perfect track record. I can't remember the 85X, I think, was the one that burned the ESC if you ran it on 3S, but overall, BetaFPV has a decent track record of making solid stuff. Good build quality, reasonably durable, good performance. Is it worth $30 more to you? For a lot of people, the answer is going to be no. And I think just based on specs and weight, we could expect the Mobula 6 to fly similarly to this, although again, I haven't tested it, so I can't say for sure. The other quadcopter that you gotta have in the back of your head is the Newbeedrone Brushless Acro B. Newbeedrone have been holdouts on brushed motors are the best for so long, and finally okay, brushless motors are better. And Newbeedrone is releasing a brushless Acro B with, again, very, very similar specs to this guy, 18,000 kV motors, so much lower kV motors. It's going to be more of a cruiser and less of a ripper. But the Acro B comes in at like 140 bucks. Newbeedrone really likes their products, and that's going to be $30 more again than this guy. Now, I can't even comment on that because that's still in pre-order. But I have to mention, those two quads are so similar to this one at 80, 110, and 140 bucks that if you're shopping for this one, you probably ought to at least glance at those other ones and see if they suit you. I'm going to put links to this, and what the heck, I'm going to put links to those other things down in the video description. And if you have been convinced to buy one of them, those links are affiliate links, and one of the ways I support myself, this is my full-time job. In case you're new here, this is my full-time job, and one of the ways I support myself is through those affiliate links. If you make any purchase after you click one of those links, just click the link before you go shopping. You make any purchase, and I get a small commission. You don't have to buy this item. You can buy anything from those stores, and it's a small amount, but it does add up, and it really helps a lot. I hope you've enjoyed this video. What do you think? Have you tried this out? Do you think it's any good? BT2.0 connector. You convinced? What do you think? Mobula 6? 80 bucks, $30 cheaper. Mobula 6, just as good as this? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. That's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Happy flying.